life was so good during the Roaring 20s. I mean, it was going up, up, up. The economy was going up, but sometimes what goes up must come crashing down with the stock market crash in the Great Depression. But a deal was struck to try to make things better, a new deal. These are the topics we're going to be discussing today. But what you need is your note cards, blank note cards, and let's start making ourselves note cards, all right? So let's do the Roaring 20s, right? Let's start with the early stuff, right? Life is good, economy is good, things are exciting. Well, we got Henry Ford. Please write Henry Ford. Let's talk about Mr. Ford, automobile guy. He was the leader of the American automobile industry. There were many in different companies in the automobile industry, but he was the big one, the leader of the major Ford Motor Company. The vehicle that Ford became very popular for was the Model T. It was both popular and it was affordable. You know, in today's dollars, it would have just cost a couple $100, and you would have been able to own a Model T. Now, here's the question. How was it possible that they could produce the Model T for such an inexpensive price? Well, what happened is Henry Ford gets credited with using the assembly line. Hey, let's line up 100 people, right? And as something comes through, you just do one special small thing, like you just turn that screw like halfway, and then it goes to the next person. And then it goes all the way through, and it's very efficient, and you get stuff done quickly and accurately. And what did this do? Ford impacted the economy by improving manufacturing. How did he improve manufacturing? The assembly line. It was his use of the assembly line. He didn't invent the assembly line, but the assembly line was being done in Ford's plants, which allowed the Model T to be a popular vehicle and an affordable vehicle. So the improved manufacturing assembly line to make goods more affordable. I know what you're thinking. I just thought of a preview first. I'll remember this. Henry Ford made things more affordable. We good? Ready to do the next one? Let's do another one. Jazz! Jazz, jazz, jazz. What was jazz? Well, it was the music most associated with the 1920s. Jazz originated in New Orleans, popular all over the United States, especially in New York City. And it was popular in the 1920s. Jazz music was part of the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was an explosion of African American culture in the 1920s in New York. But if we hear jazz music, we're thinking of the 1920s. Big association, 1920s jazz. Right, and all this stuff I'm talking about right now, these are big themes and things that happened during the 1920s, also called the Roaring 20s. Hey, that was an easy note card, right? Let's do another one. Please put this one, 1920s media. We have so much media today, don't we? We have print media, you know, newspapers, magazines. We have the TV, right? The internet, social media, right? We got all these different types of media today. What was the media of the 1920s? Well, it's newspapers, magazines. We call that print media. Radio gets popular in the 1920s, and so do movies. Movies had been around before the 1920s, but you start having movies with audio where you can hear the people talk. These were called talkies. So you have radio, you got movies, you got newspapers, magazines, right? That's the 1920s media, okay? Mass media, all that together, shapes popular culture and values. This just makes sense. People are influenced, good or bad, by media. People look up to the stars of the media, or they're influenced by the opinion editorials in the newspapers. As well as sparked fads and norms. You know, the fads and the norms really showed up in the newspapers and the magazines. A whole slang came out of the 1920s that you would see in magazines, like some things, glasses were called cheaters. If you thought somebody was giving you bad information, oh, that's a bunch of baloney, right? You hear terms that are still around today that get popular in the 1920s. Hey, and one other thing, movies offered an escape from Depression-era realities. This is a little bit later, but when we get into the Great Depression and the horrible, job situation for many Americans, money, homelessness. If you did have a little money, you don't have much, but a little bit, you might go watch a movie to get your mind off of the harsh Depression era realities, the reality of what you're going through. Cool? Hey, pause me, because I'm going to go to the next slide now. Pause me. Okay, you're not pausing me? Let's roll. Let's do one more. Let's do the Scopes trial, called the Scopes monkey trial. Sometimes. The Scopes trial. Okay? It was in 1925. It was a trial in Dayton, Tennessee, over the teaching of evolution in public school. Evolution, the theory of human origin, not, human from the beginning, but evolved over time to become the species that we are today, evolution, okay? Fundamentalist Christians took high school biology teacher to trial. So here's what happened. There was a high school biology teacher named John Scopes in Tennessee, and he taught evolution in his course. Now, it wasn't part of the curriculum to teach evolution. He took it upon himself to do it. And fundamentalist Christians had an issue with this, and they thought it was inappropriate, so they took him to trial. How did the trial work out? Well, he was found guilty. Well, he should be found guilty if you think about it. He was charged with teaching evolution, and he was teaching evolution. He got a very small fine. It's not like he got thrown in jail. It wasn't a big deal in terms of what happened to him. More importantly, the case represented the growing conflict between fundamentalist religion and science. This idea of evolution and science and this idea of fundamentalist religion, which is a very literal interpretation of the Bible, are clashing as seen in the Scopes trial, also called the Scopes monkey trial. In Tennessee, evolution, fundamentalist Christians battling it out with the theory of evolution. The Scopes trial. You see, during the 1920s, not everything was, it was so fun. It was so fun. No, there were some conflicts that were happening at this time as well, okay? It's quiz time. Gosh, I love quiz time. All right, let's review what you do here. I think we made 4 cards, right? I want you to set your phone for 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to say 2 minutes. So you set it, and you set it to the side. And then I want you to just flip in the card. Okay, Scopes trial. What was that? Where was it? Tennessee. Okay, right. Or mass media, a newspaper, and magazines, right? I want you to practice for 2 minutes, and then we're going to take a quiz. So if you would like to join me in setting our timer, let's go to the clock. Let's go to the timer. And I think we should listen to Cosmic. Absolutely. Hey, you set yours 2 minutes to Cosmic, and I'll be reading The Indian Frontier of the Mid-19th Century. Tell you what, great read. Really good one. Check that one out. Take out a piece of paper, blank piece of paper. You're going to turn this piece of paper in, okay? Number it 1, number it 2, number it 3, number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got it? I'm going to post some questions. Just write the answer. Number 1, no cheating, no cheating, no cheating. Who improved manufacturing to make goods more affordable? Number 2, jazz was most associated with which decade? Jazz was most associated with which decade? Number 3, list all 4 types of 1920s media. There were 4. 2 of them have a slash. They're kind of grouped together. They're kind of associated. Then there's 2 others. Number 4, what was most important about the Scopes trial? Like, what did it represent a clash between which 2 things were battling it out? Scopes trial. Why was it important? Good, let's do this. Number one. Who improved manufacturing to make goods more affordable? Henry Ford. Assembly line, Model T. Number two, jazz was most associated with which decade? The 1920s. The Roaring 20s. 3, list all 4 types of media. Newspapers, magazines, radio, movies. Shaping cultural norms, values, sparking fads, going to the movies to escape depression realities. 4, what was most important about the Scopes trial? It represented a battle or a clash between fundamentalist Christians, or fundamentalist religion, and science. Religion and science, religion and science in the Scopes trial, okay? Perfect. Hey, let's do some more note cards. Flappers! Let's flap. You want to flap with me? Let's flap. Hey, flappers was the label for women in the 1920s who challenged traditional expectations of women. Dress and behavior, right? So before this, there's a certain idea, okay, you're a woman, so your hair has to look like this, you gotta dress like this, you gotta stay inside the house, don't go out and do anything otherwise, don't have fun, don't drink, don't smoke cigarettes, don't wear too much makeup, don't cut your hair short. Well, the flappers, they do all those things, right? They have different hairstyle, different clothing they wear, different behavior. They're going out, they're going to speakeasies, right, where the names of the bars where the alcohol was sold, even though alcohol was prohibited because of prohibition. And this was a challenge to the ideas of what a woman should be, traditional expectations. Here we go. Flappers represented a challenge to the idea that women should not play a role in public or leave the home. That was sometimes the old idea, and flappers were looking to change that idea. Flappers are looking to change that idea. So, what would a flapper's favorite amendment be? Well, of course, it would be the 19th Amendment, because the 19th Amendment gave flappers, women, including flappers, the right to vote. Okay? Cool. Flappers are done. Let's do another one. Let's do the KKK of the 1920s. The KKK has been around pretty much since the end of the Civil War, and they get big, very big in the 1920s. In the early 20th century, the Ku Klux Klan experienced a, quote, rebirth, right? Sometimes rebirth has a positive connotation, but of course, in the case of the KKK, a negative connotation, a rebirth. A movie, Birth of a Nation, helped spark this, but also there was a new ideology. You see, the original Ku Klux Klan was pretty much hate African Americans and oppress and intimidate African Americans, and that's what they were doing. The KKK of the 1920s was opposed to immigration. In addition to their hatred of African Americans, the KKK also began opposing immigrants to the United States. So when there was more immigration, these new immigrants that are coming over, the KKK considered them not to be real Americans and expanded their level of hatred, which did get them more popular in the 1920s. Okay, cool. Hey, racial and ethnic tensions. All right, this is all happening in the 1920s. It wasn't all great, good, and fun for everyone. After World War I, the United States experienced a rise in racial and ethnic tension, mostly sparked by a reaction to immigrants and existing racial tensions. So it's like the existing racial tension, we're talking about battles between African Americans and white Americans, but the immigrants is the new thing, right? So you're getting these Southern and Eastern European immigrants coming over, and they're being met with a lot of nativism. Okay, so a couple of examples. Jot these down. You don't have to write out exactly what they were. Just kind of recognize them. One example is the Sacco and Vanzetti trial, which is a murder trial in which 2 Italian immigrants were given a very unfair trial, and there was some anti-Italian racism that was a part of that. The Palmer raids were raids against Eastern European immigrants. They were suspected of being communists and having like stockpiles of bombs and weapons, but they ended up tearing out all these people's homes and they found nothing, and they believed that there was racial, ethnic motivations behind why the Palmer raids happened. And then the Scottsboro Nine, who were 9 African Americans in the South who were accused of rape and found guilty of rape based off of a false accusation. This is the inspiration of To Kill a Mockingbird. So we have racial, we have ethnic tensions in the 1920s, and this is happening all the while that all the other 20s stuff is happening, okay? All right, so jot those down, be able to recognize those. Okay, yeah. After World War I, experienced the rise of racial and ethnic tensions. Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance, a rebirth and explosion of culture, happened in Harlem, New York. It's a celebration of African American culture in literature, art, and music. Celebration of African American culture and literature, art, and music. Originated in Harlem, which is an area of New York, which is why it's called the Harlem Renaissance. There were two big leaders of the Harlem Renaissance. Leaders include Langston Hughes, who's an author and a poet. He wrote about segregation and racial issues. And Louis Armstrong, a jazz player. That's all part of African American culture, which was experiencing a rebirth with the Harlem Renaissance. Cool. Hey, let's do the Great Migration. Sticking with African American history at this moment, let's do the Great Migration. It's between about 1910 and 1920. That's when it was really moving, to migrate, to move from one area to another. And where was this migration happening? From where to where? It was a movement of African Americans from the South to northern cities. Why would African Americans leave the South? Well, to escape discrimination, of course, and to escape poverty. Because the South is a more economically depressed area than the rest of the United States. So they're looking to leave that poor economy and leave the KKK that's around. Yes, now the KKK is in other places, but leave that intense Southern discrimination and go to northern cities was the motivation for the Great Migration between 1910 and 1920. Okay? Hey, you done? Pause me. No. Go. Okay, it's quiz time. What do you think? 1 minute or 2 minutes? How did you do the last time? Did you do really good? Do 1. Did you not get everyone right? Do 2. Set your timer. I'm thinking night owl. Let's do night owl, yeah? And while you're doing this, I'll be reading the definitive biography of Robert Gould Shaw. Great. Excellent. Hey, take out a piece of paper. Number 1, 2, 3. Number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like we did last time. Ready for some questions? Here come some questions. 1. In addition to African Americans, who else did the KKK focus their hatred on in the 1920s? Not African Americans, someone else, some other group. Cool. 2. Tensions based on what rose after World War I? I think that's kind of a tough question, so I'm going to say this. Racial and blank tensions. Fill that in. Racial and blank tensions. Number 3. The Harlem Renaissance was a celebration of what? The Harlem Renaissance was a celebration of what? Cool. Take a second. Do number 4. Why did African Americans leave the South during the Great Migration? Why did African Americans leave the South during the Great Migration? You ready? Let's do it. Number 1. In addition to African Americans, who else did the KKK focus their hatred on in the 1920s? Immigrants, new immigration, they increased their hatred to immigrants. 2, tensions based on what rose after World War I? Racial and ethnic tensions. Okay? 3, the Harlem Renaissance was a celebration of what? It was a celebration of African American culture. If you said that, it's good. It's fine. But more specifically, African American culture in literature, arts, and music. Cool. 4, why did African Americans leave the South during the Great Migration? To escape 2 things: to escape discrimination and to escape poverty. Discrimination and poverty. All right? Hey, we did the 1920s, which means we got to do the stock market crash and the Great Depression. Ready to get depressed? Let's get depressed. Here we go. Credit in the 1920s. Credit, not like, hey, I give you a lot of credit, good job. I mean like credit as in, I need credit to buy something, so loan me the money in advance, right? Credit in the 1920s. You get loaned, you get a loan, you got to pay it back plus a little what? Interest, right? Exactly. Okay. Goods were easily purchased during the 1920s on credit. Everybody was buying things on credit. Okay, not everybody, but a lot of people. And interest rates were low. Remember I said you got to pay it back plus interest? Well, if interest rates are high, you don't want to take out the loan because you don't want to pay it back with that high interest. But if it's low, you think, hey, I can do that. Interest rates were low, which enabled more Americans to take out large loans. More Americans were able to take out large loans because interest rates were so low. Okay? All right. We'll go back to that in a second. Just know that people are buying things, including stock, with loans, not their own money, and that'll be an issue. Speaking of which, the causes of the stock market crash. I want to do 3 big causes. Let's do 3 big causes, okay? Number 1, what's called over-speculation. And that's when Americans made risky stock purchases expecting the market to always rise. They bought a lot of stock, many of them with money they could not afford, thinking the market would go up, always go up, and then you always make money. But if it goes down, you're really in bad shape. That's over-speculation. How do they do it? 2, buying on margin. Buying on margin means you purchase a stock, the stock market, some shares, with mostly or entirely loaned money. You borrow the money to buy the stock. Then you may think that's not very smart, but think if it just goes up, you'll make money, and then you can pay back the loan and keep the profit. But wait, what if the stock crashes? Well, you don't have anything to pay them back because you loaned it in the first place. When stocks went down, there was no way to pay back the loan. That's buying on margin, and that is very related to over-speculation. 3, banks invested in the stock market. When the market crashed, bank deposits were lost. Banks invested in the stock market. So if you just went to a bank and gave your money to the bank, instead of, making safe loans, they made aggressive over-speculation loans. And then when all that money went boom because of the stock market crash, the people who deposited their money in the bank, they lost that money as well. Okay? Pause me. That was a big slide. Pause me if you're still looking. If you're not looking, let's go. Black Tuesday. Let's talk about Black Tuesday. Late October of 1929. It was October 29th of 1929 when the stock market took a dive. I mean, it took a major, major, major dive. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is just a fancy word for the average of how all the stocks are doing, and it gives you a good idea if they're doing well or poorly, well, it began to drop. And once it started going down, investors didn't hold on to their shares. They raced to sell. And as they were selling, the market just kept going down. All right? The stock market lost approximately 12% of its value on Black Tuesday, and many historians think that Black Tuesday is when the Great Depression officially began. The stock market crash began. Okay? Federal Reserve System. Let's do another one. Federal Reserve System. Hey, we learned about the Federal Reserve System last test stuff, right? Created to as part of a progressive reform to keep an eye on the banking system. Well, they did not do a good job. Bank regulatory system which failed to prevent the Great Depression. The Great Depression happened, and banks played a big role in it, and the Federal Reserve didn't do a lot to stop that from happening. 1. Failing to prevent the collapse of the banking system. I guess they could have bailed out the banks, which really isn't that fair because no one would ever have thought about bailing out banks. That's a much later economic idea, but whatever. The banks did collapse, and they were in charge of regulating the banks. 2. Shrinking of the nation's money supply. This is a contraction of the money supply, because think about it. If there aren't a lot of banks around, it's hard to get loans, which means it's hard to get, what's the expression you can say? That bread. 3. Failed monetary policy, and we're going to talk about monetary and fiscal policy in a bit. But just what it means is interest rates were too low during the 1920s. Remember when we did the note card on credit and about how people got low rates so they borrowed more than they should? And that kind of led to this whole problem. So that's the Federal Reserve System, okay? Beautiful. Pause me if you're not good. If you're good, let's go to the next one. Hey, it's quiz time. I think that was 4, right? Was that 4? I think it was. You know what to do. Set your phone. Set an alarm. I'm thinking about playtime. Hey, I'm listening to playtime. You got it set. What am I reading? I'm reading The Definitive History of Theodore Roosevelt. Yes, Teddy. Create the Bull Moose Party. Take out a piece of paper. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ready? Quiz questions. Here we go. Number 1, in the 1920s, Americans purchased goods uneasily available. What? Number 2, list 2 of the 3 causes of the stock market crash. 2 of the 3 causes of the stock market crash. There were 3, name 2. Three, when the stock market began to crash on Black Tuesday, what did investors race to do? When the stock market began to crash on Black Tuesday, what did investors race to do? Number 4, which system failed to prevent the collapse of the nation's banking system? Here we go, number 1. In the 1920s, Americans purchased goods uneasily available. Credit. Interest rates were low. Buy stuff with money you don't have. 2, list 2 of the 3 causes of the stock market crash. Cause number 1 was over-speculation. Thinking the market will go up, so making big bets. 2, buying on margin, which means buying stock with money you don't have, with borrowed money. And then 3, banks invested in the stock market. Banks were playing the game, and when the shares went down, deposits were lost. 3, when the stock market began to crash on Black Tuesday, what did investors race to do? To sell their stock, to sell their shares. Everybody was going sell, and the market went down. 4, which system failed to prevent the collapse of the nation's banking system? That will be the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System oversees the banks. Okay? Beautiful, great. Do some more note cards. Let's do some more note cards. Let's do agriculture in the 1920s and the 1930s. Agriculture, just a very fancy word for farming. During the 1920s, American farmers overproduced crops, which drove down the prices. They grew a lot of stuff, partially because of World War I. A lot of food needed to be grown, so they did. And then they didn't stop when the war was over. So this drove down the prices. During the Great Depression, prices dipped even lower, which negatively impacted American farmers. What you need to know from this note card is farmers aren't doing well in the 1920s, 1930s. They're not making enough money from growing their crop. Okay? Just know that, and that will create a program during the New Deal. The Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. The Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. Okay? It was officially named the Tariff Act of 1930, but everybody calls it, oh no, the Hawley-Smoot, not Hawley-Smooth. Sorry, go back. Just ignore that. S-M-O-O-T, Tariff Act. It issued high tariffs on foreign competition. So think about that. America's not doing well economically. I don't know. We're selling. I don't know what we're selling. We're selling shoes, right? And Great Britain's making shoes. Spain's making shoes, right? So their shoes, we want to make them cheaper, or we want to make them more expensive, so people buy the American shoe. So we hit them with a tariff. That makes sense, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense, because what happens is the foreign nations responded with retaliatory tariffs, which means they tariff the United States right back. And that hurt the U.S. economy, because you can't sell those shoes anymore as well as you used to, because in foreign markets, they cost more money. So as a result, the tariff led to a decrease of U.S. exports. There weren't as much exports happening because American exports were hit with a tariff now, a tax on American exports, and this led to a decrease in world trade. World trade was strangled. Pause me. Pause me if you're not good, but if you're good, I'm going to the next one. Here we go. Characteristics of the Great Depression. You're going to love this slide. Bad stuff. I mean, think about it. It wasn't, the great joy, right? The great party. It was the Great Depression. So there must have been a lot of bad stuff happening. And this is it, man. Rise in homelessness, high unemployment at 25%. That's incredibly high. Bank closing, over 10,000 banks closed. I mean, that's some examples of the Great Depression's characteristics. If you ever see, a question, it's this simple. If it's bad, it's probably the Great Depression. And if it's a good thing, it probably isn't part of the Great Depression. Okay? Very good. Let's do another one. Let's do labor unions during the Great Depression. You still had labor unions. They're still around. And they got more aggressive during the Great Depression. A word for this is more militant. Sparked by difficult economic conditions, labor unions became more militant in their strikes. Labor unions became more militant in their strikes, in the way that they did things. Unions conducted walkouts as well as sit-down strikes. A sit-down strike is a really good example of being more militant. Sit-down strike is, hey, I operate this big piece of machinery, but instead of walking out, I'm going to sit on it. So it's shut down. So no one can work it, so I hurt the company even more. Growing militancy of labor unions, okay? Very good. Super great. Hey, it's quiz time. You know what to do. Set an alarm. 1 or 2 minutes. Let's listen to Constellation. Okay? Hey, you're listening to Constellation. You're going to study your cards. I want you to go 4 for 4 on the next quiz. And what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be reading The Legacies of Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created. Take out a piece of paper. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Oh! 1, 2, 3. Nice. Short quiz this time. Here we go. Number 1. What impact did overproduction of crops have on American farmers? Did it help? Did it hurt? If it helped, how? If it hurt, how? Number 2, what did the Hawley-Smoot tariff lead to a decrease in? I'll accept 2 answers for this. Few options, just go ahead and put 2, or 1, or 2 if you know 2. 3, sit-down strikes were an example of the growing blank of labor unions. Labor unions were becoming more blank. What is that? Number 1, what impact did overproduction of crops have on American farmers? It hurt American farmers because it led to lower prices. Supply was high, demand was lower. 2, what did the Hawley-Smoot tariff lead to a decrease in? U.S. exports and world trade. Those 2 are related. 3, sit-down strikes were an example of growing militancy of labor unions. Labor unions were becoming more militant. Hey, we're going to do 2 note cards, and then we're going to do a quick quiz. Big idea, concept here. What's fiscal policy? What's monetary policy? Please write down fiscal for fiscal policy. Fiscal policy will always be controlled by the President of the United States and Congress. It is their job to control fiscal policy. And what is it? Fiscal policy decisions determine levels of government taxation and spending. How much do we tax? Do we tax a lot? Do we tax a little? How much do we spend? Do we spend a lot? Do we spend a little? And what do we spend on? These are all fiscal decisions. F-I-S-C-A-L. Fiscal decisions. Okay? Cool. Next one is monetary policy. What is the root word of monetary? It is money. Controlled by the Federal Reserve. Remember we talked about the Federal Reserve. They're in charge of the banks, right? Monetary policy decisions control the supply of money and credit to expand or contract the economy. So monetary policy can use interest rates to have more loans, which increases money supply, or less loans, which contracts the supply of money in the economy. Money, banks, you find money in a bank, banks, Federal Reserve, monetary policy. You got that? Hey, I'm not even going to read my books. I'm not even going to set my alarm. You pause me, and I want you to boom, 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 boom. Look at these cards, right? Pause me right now. Ready? 1, 2, 3, pause me. Okay, you done looking at the cards? If you want to look at it more, pause me again. I'm gonna go to the questions right now. You ready to go to the questions? Okay, I'll go to the questions. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You ready? Here we go. A tariff is an example of what policy? I'm going to tell you the answer. But write down your thought. You good? Tariff is fiscal policy because a tariff is a tax. And remember, the President and Congress work with taxation, and that's fiscal policy too. Federal Reserve controls blank policy. Put monetary, write monetary, money in a bank. Federal Reserve is bank. 3, controlling the supply of money. Supply of money. So expanding or contracting how much money is in the economy by using interest rates. Money, 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 money. Money. Monetary policy. 4, the President and Congress control fiscal policy. All right, you got that? You got monetary and fiscal? Monetary and fiscal? Good, 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 good. This is the last set of note cards. Then we're going to take a quick quiz. Then we're done. FDR takes office. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the most popular presidents the United States has ever had. Franklin D. Roosevelt took office as president in 1933 when banks were closing and 1 in 4 workers were unemployed. Like we said, unemployment was about 25%. So things weren't going well when FDR became president of the United States. FDR said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." He said that famous quote. Why? He said it in an attempt to calm nations' worries and restore confidence in the banks. No one wanted to put their money in a bank because they thought that the bank would lose all their money. But a good economy needs banks to loan money out and start new businesses. So he said, stop fearing, because the only thing we should fear is fear itself. We good? Pause me if you're still writing. You good? Let's go. Here we go. Let's do some New Deal. So the New Deal was Franklin Roosevelt's program to try to get America out of the Great Depression. And the New Deal had all these different programs. We're going to go over a couple of the programs. The first one was called the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration. The WPA was that should say relief. The WPA was a RELIEF. That was just a typo on the keyboard. Was a relief measure which provided direct payment to people for immediate help. Direct payment for immediate help. Hey, premium way to remember this. Look at it. Ready? W. Ready? If you work, you get pay. PA. Workers completed public projects such as roads, federal building, and the arts, including some really good history work, was funded by the Works Progress Administration. Okay? You good? Ready for the next one? Next one, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, also called the AAA. Remember we talked about the farmers not doing so well? Yeah, this has to do with the farmers. The AAA attempted to help the nation's farmers by limiting production in order to raise prices. It doesn't sound that exciting, but think about it. Limiting production means not growing as much stuff. In some cases, they even would burn their fields, burn their crops. They got paid to do this. But what about the animals? The animals were slaughtered at times. Because if you limit supply, you raise prices. Government paid farmers to destroy crops and animals and not to plant new fields. Don't plant any more fields. Keep your production low. The AAA was a recovery program designed to help bring the nation out of the Depression over time. Bring America out of the Depression over time. Okay? Pause me if you ain't good. If you're good, I'm going to the next one. Next one is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, also called the FDIC. The FDIC was created to provide government insurance for bank deposits. This means if you put your money in the bank and the bank loses it, it's insured. You'll get paid by the federal government. Designed to do two things. Number one, correct unsound banking and investment practices. So one thing it did was keep an eye on the banks even more so. Two, restored public confidence in banking systems. It restored public confidence in banking systems because you know your money is insured. It is insured. You lose it, the bank loses it, you're getting it back. Okay? Hey, Social Security Act. Another big program. Social Security Act. Okay? Designed to offer safeguards for workers. Safeguards for two situations of workers. Unemployed and older workers. It offered a monthly retirement benefit to people over 65. As things stand right now, when you're 65, you will get paid a monthly benefit. And that will be from Social Security. Offered unemployment insurance to the unemployed looking for work. So if you're out of work, if you're unemployed, you will receive money to help you while you're looking for a new job. This is a major, major program that is around today, and it's a big deal today, and it comes from the New Deal. Hey, let me see. Oh, hey. There should be a card on here, but there's not. I'm just going to explain to you real quick. What's a legacy of the New Deal? A legacy of the New Deal was there's this idea that it is the job, the responsibility of the federal government to intervene in the economy, to try to promote the general welfare, to intervene in the economy, to take care of people. Government was smaller, but after the New Deal, government gets a lot bigger. Hey, I want you to pause. I want you to read your note cards, study your note cards. Let's listen to Hillside. Love Hillside. That's Hillside. Hey, you're studying 1 or 2 minutes. I'm reading The Definitive History of the American Revolution. The British are coming. The British are coming. Number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You ready? Number 1. Which New Deal program provided direct payment for immediate help? Please put which New Deal program provided direct payment. What is the name of that New Deal program? Number 2. Which New Deal program limited agricultural production in order to raise prices? Limited agricultural production in order to raise prices. Number 3, which program was created as a reaction to unsound banking practices of the 1920s and 1930s? Created as a reaction to unsound banking practices of the 20s and 30s. And 4, this was based off what I just told you. I don't know how it didn't make its way into the note card, so just do your best. A New Deal legacy is the belief that the U.S. government should play an active role in doing what? So let me rephrase that. The U.S. government should play an active role in intervening in the what? Intervening in the what? Hey, if you get that one, great. If not, don't worry about it. Ready? Number 1, which New Deal program provided direct payment for immediate help? The Works Progress Administration, the WPA. 2, which New Deal program limited agricultural production in order to raise prices? The Agricultural Adjustment Administration, the AAA. Number 3, which program created as a reaction to unsound banking practices of the 20s and 30s? The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC. A New Deal legacy is the U.S. government should intervene in the economy. If the economy isn't doing well, the government will get involved. The government will promote the general welfare. The government will provide services to the people. We just did the Roaring 20s. We did the Great Depression. And we did the New Deal. And you are going to do well on this upcoming assessment.